Welcome to Spare Room Studio, a place to create and relax. Hi everyone, today I'm going to colour in this book called Colourful Time by Gugeli. And I'm going to colour this page here, and I'm going to use the Kuretake Gansai Tambi larger set that I purchased recently. I've wet a couple of the colours that I think I might want to use in here. Pre-wet those with a pipette, and I've got some palettes, brushes. Hopefully I've thought of everything that I need. Also got some near colour 2s close to hand in case I want those as well. A whole heap of brushes. So I think I've got everything. And let's jump in. So, I hope you are all well. I've had a small break from recording because I'm just going to grab this little palette here. And I'm going to, well, I'll use the plate first actually, and put the palette aside. And let's see if I can get started without more yammering on. I've had a small break. Felt like I was getting a little bit jaded, I guess, for want of a better word, with my colouring, and I've made quite a few videos that have been deleted for one reason or another, and just couldn't seem to, create anything that I was really 100% happy with, or wanted to share with you all. So I needed that little bit of time, I guess, just to rethink what direction I wanted to go in, and what I wanted to do with the channel and so on. So yeah, I just needed that little bit of a week or so break. I've been doing a lot of work with these watercolours and water-based mediums for a while, and I thought that maybe you might all be getting a bit bored with that, but I really just want to use these things at the moment, and I'm looking for pictures and so on that suit this sort of work. So I apologise if it's not your thing. I'm sure if it isn't, that you'll just, click stop and go and look for something else that is more your thing. But I really want to just sort of explore this while, that desire is there to learn and try to use these to their best advantage. That's what I'm going to go with. I don't feel like there would be much to be gained by forcing myself to do things that are, not really what I want to do. And I just have to have faith that, if I do the things that I enjoy, which currently is this, then, the people that want to watch it will find it. So I apologise if it's not your thing. But that is the really cool thing about YouTube and social media, is that there are so many great creators making content that, with the correct search term, you will find the things that we really are interested in. So these are the Kuretake Gansai Tambi. I think it's the 48 set. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 48 colours in this set. I don't want to use the Art Nouveau today. I just want to have a go with this particular set, and the colours are a little bit different, of course, in the Art Nouveau set. So today I felt like I just wanted to focus on this particular colour range. And so once again, I've got the poster that goes with the other book, which is Find Colour, I think. And I'm using a picture from that poster as a bit of an idea for some colours. But this is a totally different image, so I've got that off to the side there just to give me some ideas for a colour scheme. And today I'm doing something a little bit different as well, in that I've started with the background first. Normally I would do the topic of the picture first and then do a suitable background, you know, to match that. But today I felt like doing it this way and seeing how that works for me. So I've got to keep in mind, of course, what sort of colour I might want to do his hair eventually. So I'm just putting the colours onto the plate here. It's just a old ceramic plate. If you've watched me before, it's one that you're very familiar with seeing, of course. I use it for a lot of the water-based media that I use. And I'm just having a go at slightly different order of technique of how I'm laying the paint down to how I would normally do it, just to have a bit of a change of scene. And what I've noticed with this book and these paints is that when there is a reasonable amount of grayscale here printing, the print seems to repel the paint. You know, it resists the paint. So that's interesting. Keep that in mind for how that might affect things. So let's see how it goes if I put the water down first. Now this book we don't see coloured on YouTube or on Instagram too often. It's a very unusual book if you're not familiar with it. The paper has a very soft feeling that, you know, is very reminiscent of how watercolour paper can feel, but it is not watercolour paper. And so I've struggled with it a little bit to find something that I like using on these pages, and I do like the way the Albrecht Dürer watercolour pencils work when I lift the colour from the tip of the pencil with the brush and apply it to the paper. I found that that's a nice way to work. I'm very interested to see if I can make these paints work in a way that I'm happy with. Because the style of the images looks like it would be perfect for watercolour. And I don't particularly like the way that pencils have felt on this paper either. So if I can make this paint work, I'd be really happy. So not quite so diluted now, just to see what effect that has on the paper. Now when you use the Gansai Tambi paint quite thickly, when it dries it can sometimes have a bit of a glossy look about it, a shiny look, almost plasticky. So I've got to try and remember to factor that in too. So using the damp brush on the dry paper gives you a very different textured look. It's called dry brushing. So I thought that might be suitable for hair. Hair is such a difficult thing to portray sometimes. You don't want it to look like a solid, you know, helmet on somebody's head. Now I'm using quite a big brush here. You can see it's quite a big brush, but it has got a nice point. So I'm trying to be loose. Okay. Now I should get his face in because it's going to be really hard now to get the skin colour in there now that I've put all that down. What am I going to use for a skin colour? I think we might go for something like that. It's more like a beige. In fact, it is called natural beige, is it? No, that one's rose beige. And I'm actually going to mix, I want it to be sort of greyish tones. So I might actually mix a bit of grey in there. Just to take some of that yellowness out of it. And that's a bit too much. So just making sure I clean that brush off before I go dipping it back into paint, because I don't want to contaminate my paint. I'm going to go for that sort of colour, I think, to start with. So let's get that in before we go putting any more hair over the top. I've sort of forgotten what order I should have been working there. It would be easier to get all those lighter colours in first and then do the hair over the top of it. So I hope you've all been well. All has been good here. I've just been in a bit of a quiet period of time in terms of creative output. I haven't really felt like colouring a lot, and I've actually been spending a little bit more time with my current crochet project because my crochet group has now gone back after the Christmas break. So I've very nearly finished a single bed sized granny square blanket that I want to use as a cover for the daybed here in the studio. And I'm getting pretty close to it being finished, so that then I just have a border to put on there. I'm just using those colours that I already have out. I'm mixing them together to see, you know, what they look like when they're mixed, to maybe introduce some shadowy looks. So yeah, I've worked on the crochet project, and I've been following some online courses for drawing. So that's been keeping me occupied, and I've been reading. I've borrowed quite a few art instruction books from the library over the New Year period, and so I've been following those and drawing a little bit more and reading and so on. So I've just felt like doing, you know, some different things for a little while. And what I find happens sometimes is when I get a little bit in a little bit of a low spot when it comes to colouring, if I pick up one of my other creative hobbies, it's still, you know, a creative expression, but it's different enough that I feel like I'm having a break from the colouring, and then it helps me get a little bit more enthused for it again, you know, and that helps me get out of the rut. So sometimes still being creative, but in a slightly different manner. You know, it just helps you come back to, you know, the hobby that was feeling a little bit forced or a little bit, you know, a bit of a chore. You come back to it with, you know, fresh eyes and a bit of enthusiasm again. So if you're hitting a bit of a slump yourself, maybe think about having that complete break for a little while. I find, you know, sometimes I try to push through it, but sometimes pushing through it just extends how long it takes you to re-find that little spark of, you know, enthusiasm and so on again. Not sure what those things are. I think there's some sort of flower petal maybe, but right, we're going to need to bring some colour in for his clothes, because that's looking all very much of a muchness at the moment. So I'm just going to re-wet that first. And I want to bring in, I think it's Indian red. So I have 2 pots of water usually on the go when I'm doing any sort of watercolour work, because you obviously need one to rinse your brush out and one for clean water. And sometimes, depending on what it is, I'll have more more than 2 pots, because it's really important to sort of keep your water clean so you don't contaminate your colours. So I need to come back obviously later with the hair colour and just, you know, put those hair details back in. And these beads and things here might be nice with some sort of metallic, you know, metallic colour afterwards. It's a bit hard to tell what's going on there, I think. Should that all be sort of flesh under there? And I do find this book quite tricky for working out what is going on with some of these details. What I'm doing is just using the tip of the brush to touch that colour in, and then to stop it drying too solid, I'm just going to put some little bits of clean water in. Okay, sorry, concentrating there is making me go a little bit quiet. Now the bird has a bit of red on his head, so I'm going to use that same colour to get started with that. Just put a little bit extra vibrancy into over here. What I might do with his face is just suggest a little bit of colour into there. Okay, now I might have to leave that to dry for a bit. Let's try and get some more of this suggestion of skin colour in here. This is why I should have done that before I put the strokes of his hair over the top, of course, but I will come back and do that. Okay, I'm just going to have to wait for that to dry. I'll be back with you really soon. Okay, so I've changed my water and that's feeling a bit dry, or more dry. I've put a bit of that lighter blue back into there while I was waiting, and a little bit into the bird there. And I've decided, like, I don't want this to be too overworked. So what I'm going to do now is start looking at picking out some of the details. And what I've got here is a load of little brushes that came out of a cheap set. And I think one's missing because I've got 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros and 5 zeros, but no 4 0. So you can see that they get progressively smaller the higher the zeros. So they were just from, you know, one of these Temu or AliExpress, something like that. And I'm going to use the 5 0 to start putting in some details into his face, because I quite like the way the colour's drying there. It is a little bit dark and murky, but I think the subject sort of suggests that. So I'm going to run with that, and I'm going to start putting in some of the details, because I'm not going to come back and put more wash over that. Now that does still feel damp, but it's not sort of wet to the touch now. And I'm just going to do some little, you know, little flicky motions just to suggest some eyelashes there. So remember, we're not going to try and portray every single eyelash and eyebrow here. We're just suggesting that they're there. One reason that I like watercolour so much is that it is encouraging me to let go of all the tight detail and loosen up, you know, my style, and not get too caught up on every single little detail that I could add in. Now you can, if you've got these small brushes, you certainly can add quite a bit of detail. But I think the very nature of watercolour paints is quite encouraging to loosen up and allow that washy, watery effect dictate, you know, how the picture looks and what level of detail that you put into the picture. So it's already starting to dry a little bit. Today it's not quite so hot here as it has been. We've had some quite warm weather again, but it is warm enough that I need the ceiling fan on. And of course all that extra air movement is meaning that the paint is drying quite quickly. Now, the trap that I can fall into very easily with these small brushes is that I start to do big areas with too small a brush. So I need to remind myself it's for fine detail, it's not for doing all these big washy areas or masses of detail on a big scale. They really are just for doing these fine details. So I just want that to be a little bit darker. As it's drying that little bit lighter, so I'm just evaluating as I go along. So remember, don't do these little fine details until you're sure that you're not going to come back with any more big washy areas, because it's just going to reactivate the paint and turn it all into mud. I'm just going to outline where the bird's head actually ends. So when I come to do that hair, I'm going to blend it back up that way. And just a little bit under here, just to suggest the edge of the bird. Okay, now I'm starting to get into these bigger areas. I'll put that small brush down. I can always come back to that later. Now, instead of going for the really big brush, I've got something in between. I just need to get this a little bit wet again because it really is drying out very quickly. And where I said that it was resisting the grayscale, it hasn't really absorbed its. The blue has gone really pale compared to what, you know, it looks like when it goes on. So I may have to use it less diluted, but I don't really want that shiny look that happens with the Gansai Tambi when you use it that way. So evaluate how it goes. It may be that this is not, you know, this might not be the paint for this book, but we'll see. We'll just keep evaluating, and you don't know until you try. So if you use the wash light enough, it is showing some of those details through it. So there is that as well, that you could, you know, manipulate that and use that to your advantage. It's a little bit difficult to tell which would be on top and which is overlapping and so on. So for now I'm just going to do it very lightly, and we can always put some details in with that fine brush at the end. So what I'm trying to do is hold the brush not too close to the tip, very light touch, so that I'm just really feathering that colour on really lightly. And I might put a little bit of the pale blue just up here in the top section where the light would be catching the top of his head. Now remember that I'm kind of going backwards doing that, because really when you're working with watercolours, all the lighter colours should be done first and then overlay the darker colours over the top of it. The Gansai Tambi are that little bit more opaque though, that's allowing me to just actually put a little bit of that over the darker colour. But generally with watercolour you wouldn't do that. Okay, so now I'm going to use, what colour was it that I had there? That was the Blue Grey Deep, this one. And I'm going to use that with a little bit of black, because now I need that, just that little bit extra something, because it's all very much one tone. So I'm going to put the black up here. And I'm going to get that really fine little brush again. And I just want a little bit extra now just on the lash line. I'm not trying to do all of it, just to sort of give you a little bit of impact. And then hopefully what you'll see in a minute is that just by being selective by the use of black and not doing it everywhere or too much, that you get quite an impact. You know, a little bit goes a long way. Really is a little bit too thick still. So what I'm trying to do is just get some really nice fine little strokes in there. Might be a bit hard to see on the camera, but hopefully at the end you'll see what I've been trying to achieve. So one of the tricks is, especially with faces, is that we don't really have that many hard lines on our face. Pretty much it's changes of tone that do all the description of what's going on. So try not to use too many very hard lines on a face. When someone has got makeup on, obviously, depending on how the makeup's been used, you can have hard lines. But if you think of a natural face with no makeup on it, there aren't really that many hard, deep lines. It's very much the change of, you know, a dark tone next to a lighter area that defines or describes the feature. So again, I'm trying not to too solid a line here or too regular, because hair has different weights. We don't see individual strands as a rule. So these sort of light flicky motions where it's the brush is sort of skipping over the surface of the paper and picking up the texture of the paper is actually quite handy for describing the hair. Now I want him obviously to have black hair. The way it was drawn suggested to me that this person would have quite dark black hair, and I've used the majority of the dark blue to suggest that and describe that without there having to be too much black, because it would just be really overpowering if I'd done that. So now what I'm trying to do is just describe the direction that the hair is falling. So that hair's coming over the top, and that is somehow all caught up here behind his neck into his jacket there. I'm just trying to describe the different directions that all this hair is going in. It's quite tricky. And time will tell whether I'm being very effective here or not. So what I can do instead of just all black is get some of this dark blue into there as well for some of the details. So remember, we don't want to make it all too solid. Of course, if you don't want to do all this with paint, then you could wait till the end and use coloured pencil or an acrylic marker or a fine liner or something to do all these details. But I actually don't want to get into tight, really tight, highly defined details. I still want this to look like essentially a watercolour painting. That's his ear that you can see through there as well. So I will keep chipping away at this, and rather than have you watch all this, I will come back to you, I think. Okay, so I've done a bit more of the hair. I think maybe just a few more strands over that face to be a little bit more sharply defined. And I'm just using the very dark blue, which is a, let's have a look. Blue Grey Deep is what it's called. And I'm just going to use a little bit more of that. There. Now what I would like to do is finish off his coat or robe or whatever that is. Do something about the flower petals, and I think we need a little bit more of the brighter blue in the background here, because it is looking rather monochromatic in, you know, those dark greys and blues. So I'm just going to grab a bit of that, and that one is called Ultramarine Pale, and I'm going to get that big brush and I'm going to just wet behind the crane. I think it's a crane here, because I don't want it all over the place. I just want it sort of to concentrate on where it's nice and bright there. Just add, this is why I usually do backgrounds last, because I feel like I like to do the subject first to get the intensity of the subject, and then I know just what needs to be done with the background. But doing the background first, I find that a little bit harder to judge. And again, that's probably one of those personal preference decisions that, you know, as you work more with a product or a medium, you start to work out how it best works for you, and that's just how I feel more comfortable doing it. And also I might just put a little bit more of that into the bird itself, and possibly even some of that down here into him. Because he was just looking so flat and grey. So I'm just going to put little bits in there, just to lift that a little bit. Okay, and let that dry. So I'm going to finish in the robe. So I think I'd like to do maybe a little bit brighter than I did have. I had Indian red. I might bring some red into it. So this one here. And I'm going to pick up that little bit there as well. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that. My page is curling up here on the side. The fan really is making it dry quite quickly. It will flatten out again eventually. I find by the time I shut the book and have it in the bookcase for a while, it does flatten it out quite a bit. Just wanted to brighten that up a little bit. I think that's enough. And then I might bring some gold in for these things that are around his neck. Now I do have the Gansai Tambi paints, but I'm just going to go with a Jelly Roll Metallic because they're quite small. It's not as vibrant as I'd like it though, so bear with me for a moment. I have the Gansai Tambi Starry colours. I'm just going to grab a pipette, and I think we might go for that really shiny gold there. Oops, I've still got a bit of red in there. So let's just let that sit for a bit. I want it to be nice and thick still. So till that is ready, let's just do, I need a little bit more water on there. And this is what you can do with the watercolour, which is nice, is that it might dry out on your plate, but you can keep reusing it over and over and over, just re-wetting it. You see, I haven't really used an awful lot of paint in terms of volume of paint. So again, if I can get away with doing as much of this with the paint and not bringing in pencil or pens, I'd like to get away with it if I can. Okay, and let's go for a nice vibrant pop of red there if we can. I've just picked up an extra bit of paint so that it's quite thick, and let's use that quite thickly, and if it stays glossy it actually won't be too bad a thing there. I think I like that. Let's see how the gold is going. Let's see if we can pick up some of this. Yeah, that's going to be much shinier, I think. Oh, excuse me. The wind has picked up today, so hay fever's back. And don't forget, you don't have to be 100% spot on with your details when you're doing watercolour. There is a little bit of a element of interpretation and looseness that you can get with that. I'm going to suggest that there's a few extra little beads there. And I'm going to do his robe. Ooh, a bit too much there. I might have to come back with a little bit of black just to get some of these details reinstated. Now I'm going to do this that there's only gold on the outside of the robe, so where it wraps around the back of his neck there, we're not going to put gold on that bit, I don't think. And I want pink for those flower petals. Running out of clean water and space here. So I'm going to pick up some of this one. That is cherry blossom pink actually, which seems like it's ideal choice for an Asian themed image. So we'll just do that, and I think he had one sort of in front of his hair here. And again over here. I think I've got all of those. So I'm just going to let that dry and I'll be back with you in a moment. Okay, so we're nearly dry. Those pink bits are still a bit damp, but I thought I'd just show you. They're probably going to dry a little bit on the glossy side. If I can get that camera to there you go. They're going to dry a little bit on the shiny side, I think, because I used it quite thickly. And this is what I've managed to achieve just with the brush. And I'm quite happy with the detail that's in that face. I don't want too much more, but I might sharpen up the eye of the crane. And I want to come back and reinstate a bit of detail around these beads and so on. And around the gold braiding on his robe. So what I've decided to do, instead of struggling with the brush, is I'm actually going to use, pardon me, a fine liner pen. I've got these ones from Ohuhu, and I'm going to use the smallest one, which is the 0.05, which is only a 0.20 millimetre fine liner. And let's hope that I've got you in here. So what I'm going to do is just very carefully and lightly just do a little bit of a detail back around some of these things. It's just lost that crispness to describe what's going on there. And I think it would be better served to have the little bit of detail over being pedantic and saying I want it to be all watercolour. You know, there are times when you can let things go, and I think this might be the time for it. Now, it's only a very tiny nib, this one, and it's rough paper, so it's going to skip and jump, which is going to help me not get too hung up on those details. So I'm just going to lightly suggest the details back into this edging on his robe. I'm holding that pen really lightly and it's skipping over the texture of the paper a little bit. Okay, so I'm not doing that edge because I just want to do it on the actual detail of the robe. Although that there would be described. And I'm just going to do maybe some very, very fine, barely noticeable lines for, you know, flicks of strands of hair that may have come loose and a bit fly away. Not too many though. Let's just put in a little bit of detail here on the beak of the crane. And I just wanted to get in a little bit more crisply around the eye of the crane there. And just a few really fine descriptive lines there. I think that might be it. That's all I want to do. So, I think I'm going to call that done. You can see that I've done it really loosely in there. Some nice watercolour effects in the background there. I think maybe in here could have done with a little bit of extra red. In fact, how about I do that before I go? So you can see how that pen looks there. So you can tell me whether you think that I overdid that or whether I should have left it alone. Now, where is my fine brush gone? So I just want a little bit of this red, just to put some little bits of colour and detail into the top of the head here. So the Gansai Tambi paints are nice for doing these really diluted washes, but it is nice having this little bit of thicker, almost glossiness, although it's not technically how watercolour, you know, traditional watercolour is known in the sort of European style or sense. And I might just put a little bit of extra in here. You can see that it certainly does dry lighter. You can also see how it gets really easy to fiddle and overwork. But every time you add something to one place, you feel like you have to balance it out in another. There we go. I think that'll be just enough red now. A little bit more in there. That will dry that little bit lighter again. Okay, so what do you think? Did I cheat too much by adding that little bit of pen in there? I think it's just enough to describe what's happening a little bit better. Okay, I'm quite happy with that, I think. And that's all the paint that I used. In fact, I had far too much black and the dark blue in the end. What was the blue again? The blue-grey deep. But you know, I can leave that on there and come to my next page and re-wet it and it will work again. So it's not really going to go to waste, and I don't think I've really wasted too much there anyway. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I will see you again really soon, I hope. Bye now. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on the next one.